Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Youth Budget presentation being done here by, of course, the Economics Society of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. And you all already know that we have an energy-packed and also very informative session loading up for you all here. And we're going to take you all on a whole journey through analysis. I'm going to show you all really what the youth vision is for Trinidad and Tobago as well, looking and examining, and of course, this budget that has been laid before us here for, of course, the fiscal year 2022. And we have a lot of things to discuss inside there. A lot of items have popped up. A lot of different things have popped up inside there that people are asking some questions about. There's some question marks just hanging over, but no need to worry. We're going to take you all through that this evening, straight throughout this session here that's running from 5 to 7 p.m. My name is Darian Ryan, and I'll be moderating the session for you all here this evening. So I am not one of the analysts, so I'm not even going to waste any time. I'm actually just going to hand it over for somebody to set the tone here for us this evening, and that is, of course, the Vice President of the Economics Society of UWI, Mr. Estelon Dumont. And he's going to be talking on economic growth and economic development, a massive undertaking, but I know he's up to the task. And of course, he's a current undergraduate student with pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Economics with a minor in Insurance and Risk Management at the University of the West Indies. He's the current Vice President of the Economic Society and co-founded the Association of Debating and Public Speaking, where he serves as the Chief Administrative Officer. And of course, he served on numerous NGOs and he finds his joy in charity. And he's even worked in youth climate policy change as well, and a whole host of other areas. And of course, he has a vivid interest in human and sustainable development. So we're not going to waste any time. Estelon, I'm going to hand it over to you. I see that you're fully prepared. I see that you're at the edge of your seat. And I know that I have plenty of things, because if I remember correctly from last year, I remember when you presented, you was just ready for them. And I know you're ready. A sip of water taken. He is ready. Set the tone for us here this afternoon, and let us enter into this discussion here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Darren, for that lovely introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here today to hear the Economic Society, our youth perspective on the fiscal package delivered by the Honourable Minister of Finance. The budget was read and delivered in Parliament on Monday, October 4th, with the theme Resilience in the Face of a Global Pandemic. But after listening, I had to revitalize myself because the budget was so long and there was a lot of COVID-19 updates and economic implications of COVID-19 on what the government did. Ever so often, I had to give myself the reassurance that I'm viewing the budget presentation and not a Ministry of Health virtual media conference. But all in all, this budget projected total expenditure to be $52.429 billion and total revenue budgeted to be $43.33 billion, with an estimated fiscal deficit to be 5.8% of GDP, $9.096 billion, all predicated on an oil price of US $65 per barrel and gas price of US $3.75 per MMBTU. I want to dive in, but before I get in, let me say that we have these awesome, lovely ideas. I think we need to create methods on how they are to be implemented, because every year we hear the good things, but the only place we see them is in the budget presentation, and that is where they will stay. That is where they'll take up residency. So we'll be graced by hearing them and then after left hanging. Let me start with the numbers first. This budget placed a lot of emphasis on energy, but I'm not going to get into that because we have a dynamic individual to present on that. We have once again leaned heavily on this commodity, this oil price of US $65 per barrel. It is of my view that the Honourable Minister was a bit optimistic in predicating that this oil price so high. However, the OPEC projected that the global demand for oil to be 3.4% in the second half of 2022. Now, the concern is centered the demand of oil on the fiscal deficit, if this predication is to experience a shortfall, then we'll be looking at a larger fiscal deficit. And if we're looking at a larger fiscal deficit, then our ability to implement some of these quote-unquote goodies will be compromised. But don't get me wrong, that's worst case scenario. If the minister is right in his predication, then that is good news. In my opinion, I think we could have found some innovative way to decrease the fiscal deficit and expand on it a little bit more. However, if that is not the case, our debt to GDP ratio will rise. Our GDP, if it's consecutively declining as it did 6 years ago, then we'll get that much faster because there's uncertainty in prices as well. I was pleased to see that some emphasis on climate change was there. I believe that we forgotten about this aspect or component, perhaps inadvertently, because of COVID-19 brought economy to its mercy. And better I believe that climate change can bring the world to its mercy. The wrath of climate change is something that we all must fear. Now, these electric vehicles, I think the direct shift from fuel to electric is a big step. Maybe we should have done it incrementally and move from fuel to hybrid and then electric. However, I heard some people saying that they want to purchase an electric vehicle, and that's fine. You're allowed to wish, you're allowed to have dreams, but you can't delve into something more so disinvestment without having any knowledge at what price these vehicles will be earmarked at. Is that only a certain group of people can afford it? That was an area of concern for me. I was pleased to see that the Minister of Finance tried to unlock a level of business confidence, and I'll address the implementation deficit later on. In all honesty, I thought that we lost the definition of diversification, and I was pleased to see that it showed some kind of emphasis on diversification, but because many years now it has been preached but never applied. And I believe as small island developing states, our definition of diversification should be different to that of the world. And what I understand by diversification, like we have to apply to a small island developing economy like Trinidad and Tobago, we should look at it as a process of shifting the pendulum. I'm not saying that we should continue, leave the oil and gas, because oil and gas will always remain part of our economic landscape. It doesn't matter where we shift the pendulum to, but have some sort of plan. As I was saying, but shifting the pendulum in such a way that it creates sustainable avenues of multiple revenue streams, so that in future occurrences of such events, in our particular context, it will be a COVID pandemic or any other event, we can cushion or bolster the effects of that. But the equation in itself still requires support. It must be equated by the efficient management of financial assets with a vivid aim of sustainable investment. Now, the budget overall was fairly a good one, but it lacks in certain areas. I must praise the Minister of Finance for certain things, and as a young person, it is my responsibility to critique as I see fit as well. I'll praise him for the utility rebates. I think that was a really good move made by the Minister. Obviously, like all other young economists, all other citizens, it is your right, your constitutional right, to have your own budget wish list as well. Something on my wish list this year was the Heritage and Civilization Fund. I wanted to see more being done with that. And let me take you back to some history of the HSF. The government amended the HSF in 2020. That meaning they adjusted the fiscal rules that govern the HSF. The HSF was intentionally designed for longer term investment, simply meaning future generations can enjoy the wealth derived from the energy sector because they're entitled to that wealth just as we are. The fund is there in time so in events that government revenue do not meet government budgeted revenue. And to cushion the fluctuations of the energy revenues, which can constitute implications to the wider economy. We want to bring some stability to the fiscal revenue and fiscal spending. Now, with that being elucidated, it really gives the impression that the fund is supposed to be split in two. The legislation is supposed to be passed to split the fund into separate entities. It's really interesting that we never really got the time to look into it. There are rules on how money is deposited, and there's rules on how money is withdrawn. Now, the stance of the HSF is at US $5.6 billion as of September 10, 2021, with US $800 million between October 2021 and October 2020, and September 2021. I think that is where the lack of transparency comes in, because where did $800 million go? Now the question is, where does that leave us? And I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. We are swimming in debt. Our debt to GDP ratio has been consecutively rising since 2015 and has now reached 84.8% in September 2021, and it's projected to be 87.2% in 2022. Now that is concerning. We are basically swimming, right? And it's not far from ending up in a debt trap. The Honourable Minister stated with confidence that our debt to GDP ratio will be on a downward trend in 2022 and 2023. Now I'm going to cite information directly from the IMF, that by 2026, our debt to GDP ratio is likely to reach about 100%. By the same time period, the IMF used the same time period that the Honourable Minister used. Now that's concerning because we're getting two information, one from the IMF and one from the Minister. Which one do we believe? Education. Well, we have a dynamic individual to discuss education, but I just want to touch on education really, really quick. I think it was inevitable that education receives a larger allocation amounting to $6.886 billion. I'm not going to dive deep into it because, as I said, we have somebody to do that. But it's concerning because if we are looking at all these lovely initiatives, there must be some sort of conversation with universities and government to equip individuals with the qualification to work at these institutes. For example, something I really, really applaud was the National Statistical Institute. At least we can get some data to make informed policy decision making. I look forward to seeing that structure. However, GATE continues to have many gaps and vertical inefficiencies, which bring me to the real question. What is GATE true intent? Do we want individuals to attend a tertiary institution and get a degree just to say they have a degree? Or are we funding individuals to be successful contributors to society? On that note, there's an upward trend in the unemployment of university graduates. Now that's alarming. GATE needs to be revisited and restructured, in my opinion. It takes into account your revenues, but not necessarily your expenditures. For example, a single-headed household, one parent, one means of income, let's say that parent is earning a household income of $12,000. Now, GATE recognized this as 25% of tuition, but totally disregarding you and your other expenses and financial commitments. There are utility bills that need to be paid, loans that need to be paid, there's rent that needs to be paid, there's food needs to be purchased, and when you minus that from your monthly income, you now have a salary that is next to nothing. And now you have to find that 25% to pay your tuition. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not asking for everyone to get it free, but I'm asking that you update the means test where you take into account the revenues and expenditures, and from that you determine who needs it and who don't, because there are those who are accessing it and they can't afford it. That's something we need to look into. Now, the fiscal stance, and yes, I said fiscal, not physical. What is fiscal policy? Fiscal policy is the management of the economy through the level of government expenditure and taxation. And we all know the arm of government that is responsible for this is the Ministry of Finance. And there are two types of fiscal policy. There's reflationary and deflationary. Reflationary is where you increase government spending and lower taxation. The opposite is also true for deflationary policy. We're experiencing something I would like to introduce now, what I like to call frozen economics. And what that means is that the economy is not responding to the policies that we are implementing. Our policies need to be suited, need to be tailored to suit our economies. And that the same applies to the monetary policy. Don't get me wrong, the central bank must be commended for maintaining the repo rate at 3.5% and maintaining the reserve requirement ratio. However, the response to this wasn't the best. And I reiterate, we need to revisit our economic policies and assess its effectiveness. I'm happy to see that the government acknowledged the high food price, which was a problem. However, this present administration identified that we are eating unhealthy, and that is why they banned soft drinks in the school system. And yes, I was affected. That hurt me. But you see, when you look at the items that the government removed that from, it's items that not really healthy for you, and that makes me question this policy of banning the soft drinks. You identify that, you want to correct that mistake, and then you come here and you create the same problem. So what you do, come back again and correct this problem, and that is what you call vertical inefficiencies in itself. But when you remove these VAT on these commodities, you're actually trying to influence the demand for these products. And it's simple like that, because you're going to see a shift and the redirection of expenditures to these types of goods, because it's affordable. And you're encouraging, and in the most simplest of terms, you're basically encouraging citizens to apply for diabetes and hypertension. So with you doing this, you have submitted or lay out an unofficial application form where citizens can now apply for diabetes and hypertension. With that being said, we're a population that's grappling with the pandemic still. And we're fresh out of a lockdown. And also the population is stratified by vaccinated and unvaccinated. We're a population that's being blinded by false hope, false belief, and false pretense, similar to what we experienced during elections. And if we have to look from a macroeconomic perspective, and if we have to dialogue on the conversation of any type of growth in the economy, part of that conversation must be linked to the rollout of vaccines. Earlier on, the IMF projected growth for TNT. I believe it was 2% And I understand that the IMF received some comments that it was not accepted. However, I believe that the IMF was doing And obviously, I don't work at the IMF, but what they're doing, they're pegging inoculation rates to the global growth projections. So the faster you inoculate the citizens, is the faster you can open your economy, is the faster you can open your doors to global business, and the faster you can get your business activity going. And of course, unemployment, employment is a big concern associated with vaccines. In the budget, I'm not going to, I'm not going to be lenient with it. I am going to be very honest here. But there were things unclear to me. For example, on page 24 of the 2020 budget statement last year, the Honourable Minister said, and I quote, Madam Speaker, effective October 6, 2020, we are freezing the filling of all vacant positions in the public sector for a period of 1 year. And today is 1 year since that policy took effect. So the policy expires today, and we have not received any sort of clarification in the whether the unemployment freeze, if the ice has been melted or what, if it has been eliminated, or is it extended to in the public sector. We have not received any clarification on that. That's something concerning to me as well. I was pleased to see that the minister kept his promise on commissioning the highway project that he promised in the last budget. That's something I appreciated, and I compliment him for that. Now, let's talk about Tobago. Tobago got an allocation of $2.357 billion, with 2.75 billion heading to recurrent expenditure. Includes utility, government rent, salaries, and what you have left is $264 million to develop an entire island. And just one project, that being the Red House, an allocation of $441 million was there. Why treat Tobago like this? There's little flexibility for Tobago right now. Tobago have, with COVID-19 being present, I think something positive can come out of COVID-19. Simply meaning, one, it accelerated our step into the future, and two, it highlighted and exposed our vulnerable areas in society and where our shortfalls lies. Well, let me rephrase that. We didn't need a pandemic for us to show us where our shortfall lies. That is in the implementation itself. With that being said, now is an excellent time to become an economist. And it presented an opportunity for us to reimagine and recalibrate our economic craft. There's a lot that needs to be done in Tobago. Trinidad cannot determine what's best for Tobago. If we are leaving Tobago out of the conversation, Tobago must have a say on what's best for Tobago as it relates to development. What exactly does Tobago have to offer? Peace of mind. That is what Tobago is offering. And there's so many things that Tobago has to offer. The rich heritage, culture. Well, I don't know if you all can relate, but Trinidad, when you go to Tobago, it's something totally different. Tobago in all its glory has attracted tourists simply because of its heritage and natural features. And that being said, I want to reject the notion that we must develop and restructure the airport before. But you can't go and spend millions and develop an airport when the rest of the island needs attention. While an airport is important, it should be a long-term goal. Let me ask this question. When you want to travel, do you research what the airport looks like? Or do you research what the place looks like? What the hotels look like? What the beaches look like? What is there for me to view when I reach it? And there have been so many talks, and it has been exemplified in all other budget presentations to develop Tobago. So many plans, but the materialization from budget presentations to reality seems to have a glitch. Like the portal isn't working. And dare I say, frozen economics once again. Clutch down, shifting gear to digital transformation. Looking at it seems pretty reasonable, but the reduction of 5% for the manufacturing sector for 2 years on qualifying projects and activities that create advancement and growth in manufacturing sector must include digitization and technology. This includes energy companies. Excludes digital energy companies, sorry. How does he plan, the Honourable Minister, on creating this digital ID? Will an app be created to support this digital ID that users can download on their handheld devices, the social health services and appointment information, and other services such as application for travel cards, grants, social services, etc.? Will we be seeing government increasing their capacity to accommodate these services? What is the policy framework for implementation? How and when will this be materialized? And again, with a beautiful vocabulary, but digitization having this dream requires the following: end-to-end security, policy, customer data management and analytics. All these take very careful. You have to be very meticulous in planning this and efficiently as well. Can the system accommodate a national ID? We want to look at all these digital initiatives, but we're still on polymer notes when the world is shifting to digital currencies. Let's face the reality now. There are components in society that cannot be digitalized, and at this point in time, without proper policy and institutional framework. Let me touch on one more thing before I wrap up really quick. When we talk about economic growth, we talk about the quantitative measure and standard of living and economic development. It goes beyond dollars and cents. We talk about qualitative measure, standard of living. The budget has some really good stuff, and I praise the minister for that because there's something great inside that can invigorate growth in there. And I hope that we execute them and explore them really efficiently and stuff. At this end, I can only complement the initiatives with hopes of seeing the reality. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Asalon. And I know that you went very much in depth there, of course, giving us a comprehensive analysis of your overall thoughts and your overall opinions on the budget as it pertains to economic development and economic growth. And of course, you don't seem to be letting the heat off at all, because you're still asking some very important questions and some ambiguities between last year's budget and this year's budget as well. Of course, talking to specific areas inside there, and your final point being a big one around digitization. And I know a lot of people have been asking, what has the Ministry of Digital Transformation and the public administration been doing over the last year or so, since it's come into proper functioning. So all these questions are questions that are up in the air. And as well, the big talk of digitization also means that some people will be left out of the equation, because our economy, our society is not up to par in terms of all systems being in place for something like that to occur and really benefit our population in a very positive way. So thanks a lot, Asalon, for setting that tone there, and for raising more questions and answers. Actually, we're going to be raised out of your conversation there, and I think it's pertinent that we ask those questions and continue to ask those questions straight throughout, especially as young people, because these budgets will be affecting us in the near future. All right, so moving right along, we're going a little bit more sectoral now, and of course we're going to be speaking about agriculture and social development next, which I find very interesting, the combination of these two elements, particularly because to me a big part of social development and a big part and a future of social development, really there's an intersection there with agriculture, right? Food security in itself, of course, is a big way in which social development will be impacted. So I'm happy that we have Janelle Watts, who's going to be sharing on this here for us. So Ms. Janelle Watts is a final year student pursuing a BSc Economics with a double minor in Environmental Economics and International Relations. She's currently the president of the Economic Society, and her passions include politics, environmental economics, youth, and economic development. And she believes, of course, in investing in the development of young economists as an imperative to paving the way forward to a sustainable future. And she's known as a youth leader in the Lower Talparo area. And as well, she has been involved in many community-based projects through numerous NGOs. So the president of the Economics Society is up next, and I know that she has something fantastic planned for you all as well. And we're going to go a little bit more depth into agriculture and social development as well. So I know that she's been doing a lot of work with NGOs and in her area as well. And so I'm looking forward to her contributions here. So Janelle, we're going to hand it over to you, and you can take us straight through this deep dive into agriculture, which has become, of course, at the forefront of many discussions, and as well social development.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as you correctly said, we're going to deep dive into agriculture. So before I begin, there are some things that we need to understand and remember throughout my discussion and my analysis, and that is climate change is now a detrimental and progressive issue that we're currently facing that impacts agriculture as well as food security. Also, COVID-19 has impacted the economies throughout the world and food security globally, which affects us here in the third world, being major food importers. Trinidad and Tobago has a very exorbitant food importation bill that needs to be dealt with, and Trinidad has a shortage, well, Trinidad and Tobago has a shortage of foreign exchange, and a major portion of that goes towards food importation. It's very important to keep in mind that over the past decade, the agricultural sector, their contribution to the GDP has been at most 1%, despite the efforts to improve. And in last year's budget, our finance minister made mention of the underperformance of this sector, as its contribution to GDP would have yet declined. Considering we have a very high food importation bill and a shortage of foreign exchange, an approach would have been taken to further improve this sector by making it a tax-free industry and also implementing various incentives to develop the sector and make it attractive to potential investors, farmers, and young persons. And I think this was really aimed to encourage local production and supply of goods so that the need for the importation of these goods, and its demand would decline. Now, our agricultural sector is hindered by inadequate water supply, which I saw they are planning to, deal with in this upcoming fiscal year. We're also plagued with diseases and fluctuations of the weather, which causes damages to our crops and our livestock as a result of climate change, and even issues with land tenure, where basically, the process is very slow with regards to farmers actually getting land tenure leases, and they don't have the authorization to properly use the land, and this really hinders financing by ways of loans and grants. And the process, it really needs to be accelerated and reformed, because these issues, it ends up hindering the productivity of farmers. So I think we're definitely in need of structural reformation in how we farm so as to adapt to the changes in climate and limitations that we're faced, in order to provide food security in a sustainable and subsistent way, and then look towards exporting to the Caribbean region. I think that if we actually improve on these areas, we have a higher possibility at increasing the efficiency, productivity, and profit of this sector, and that would benefit the economy at large. Upon my analysis of last year's budget and this year's budget, I observed that the initiatives and the ideas were more or less the same. And that really leads me to think that there were no movement or growth, or rather action, on these initiatives since they were first introduced to us, and it's really reflective in the stagnancy of the sector. And now my father's in the agricultural sector, and being a community and constituency activist myself, I can assure you that I'm well aware of the issues and the limitations that we're plagued with in the agricultural sector, and the fact that these ideas have remained but ideas that haven't, actually materialized. Now, in last year's budget allocation, the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries would have received $1.198 billion. Furthermore, there is the $500 million agricultural stimulus package, which was established and funded this year. And as the minister suggests, it's supposed to fund and support the rapid expansion of production and marketing of high demand commodities. And now this is a great initiative, but fast forward a year later, what do we have to show for that allocation? Where and how was that money spent? And rather, what materialized from it? And why is the focus here only on high commodities like vegetables, legumes, small livestock, and an adequate quality of seeds, and not the luxury goods that we import that are costing us billions of dollars each year, that we can simply grow here upon implementing the technology to do so? So, in this year's budget, I also saw that there's an additional allocation to this very stimulus package of $300 million. And, my concern is whether or not we will see some kind of movement and the yield of our investments in the sector by next year in a significant way. I can't stress this enough, the fact that we have a very exorbitant food importation bill, and it has a median value of approximately $5 billion annually. And I've even seen in July of this year in an article in the Newsday that our Ministry of Trade would have actually stated that we spent $78 million in luxury food items in 3 years. That is alarming, because that is an average of $26 million per year. And the government's way of dealing with this, as mentioned in the previous budget, was to apply the full 12.5% VAT to a wide range of luxury imported items with hopes that demand would decrease and the foreign exchange needed to purchase these items would also decrease. And for me personally, I think that is slapping a band-aid on a much dire situation when we consider the long-run consequences. This was more of a short-run approach, but in reality, these sectors and entities that demand these luxury goods will inevitably keep purchasing despite the cost, because there are no local substitutes available, and it's only when they are made available can the actual intention of this policy come to fruition. I honestly think that stricter measures and policies ought to be put in place if we ever want to recover from debt and reduce the food importation bill. It is the ability to locally produce and supply these expensive goods where our solution to decrease the high food importation bill exists. And the savings from not purchasing these goods that we can produce here can be invested into other sectors of that are in need of development, or even reinvested into the agriculture sector to further improve it. Additionally, the foreign exchange issue ought to be alleviated once we invest in these sustainable measures, mainly because of the fact that as we produce these goods ourselves, we will benefit from economies of scale. It will impact the consumers in a positive way, mainly because the products will be made more affordable as opposed to the imported ones. And for those who aren't familiar with the term economies of scale, it's basically where the production for a large amount of goods, it's spread and it's made cheaper to produce. So of course we're seeing an alarming increase in food inflation these days. I mean, it jumped to 4.9%, and it occurs for various reasons. For example, like rise in prices of factors of production and exogenous factors like shipping costs and forex availability. However, we still will see a decrease in the cost of these goods if we produce it ourselves. And personally, I think that's still a more efficient choice in terms of the opportunity cost when we consider importing them. So I really believe that stricter measures should then be implemented, such as quotas, which should be implemented with regards to the importation of the produce that we are already growing here, inclusive of what Barry Cove and Island growers are expected to supply from next year. And we really ought to use this Barry Cove Island growers partnership as a model in which more initiatives of the like can arise from, and perhaps it can take the form of public-private enterprises, each specializing in the production of supply of certain goods and livestock, and even in agro-processing, which is a major upcoming sector. And this not only allows for some state intervention to ensure equitability, but also it has the business aspect that capitalize on the profit maximization and consumer satisfaction. And this equilibrium then ensures an efficient operation with high profits from not only supplying locally, but also exporting regionally, and can then be taxed, thus adding to our GDP and national revenue. So I was very satisfied personally to hear that there were several investments made in the private sector, and that there were more public-private enterprises in the works, like the Parboil Rice Plant and Aripo Livestock Nutrimix Central Farms. And for me, most surprising, it was PriceMart. I believe that more efforts must be made to market as well as find international markets for our local produce, where they're not exploited, where our farmers aren't exploited. And there exists this situation where NAMDEVCO, they purchase goods from our local farmers, and they act as the exporter of our goods when they're actually a state entity that's supposed to find the market for our farmers and seek their best interests at heart. But to be honest, I think that whole system needs to be assessed and reformed, because it's not very encouraging or attractive to persons wanting to get involved in the industry to be an exporter, and then they're ripped off by a middleman. So I also see that they mentioned the endorsement and distribution, the endorsing of the distribution and purchasing of local produce, and improving the relationships with food chains and franchises, supermarket franchises, and particularly PriceMart. And I was really pleased to see this, mainly because I believe that they should strictly carry our local produce, considering 3/4 of their goods are imported and they require large sums of forex, and their revenues go back to their motherland because they're a foreign company. So I really look forward to them carrying our local produce that are, produced by Berry Cove, like the berries and the veggies and the fruits and stuff like that when they begin to harvest. I also, really want to make mention of firms and even the government supporting the concept of eco and agro tourism as an additional revenue stream. I think even if it's on a small scale, it can be very much beneficial and something we can build upon. And I really see also that they tend to stress a lot on the youth involvement in agriculture. And, young people tend to shy away from the agricultural sector because they think it's like a lot of hard work and, you have to work real hard for this money and it's real hot sun and that kind of thing. But considering the technological advancements in the sector throughout the world, which stems from combating the limitations and climate change issues that we're faced with, and how it contributes to food insecurity, we no longer have to work very hard in the hot sun. We have things like greenhouses, aquaponics, hydroponics. We have smart farming and cyber farming, which can be used through computerized systems and even your smartphone to control things like irrigation systems and lighting and temperatures. So, it's made very easy, convenient, effective, and efficient, and most importantly, sustainable. And I think it's these technological factors that really need to be marketed properly to attract and encourage young persons to get involved in the industry, paired with the financial support and incentives as proposed by our minister. Now, there have been plans for various training and educational programs so as to aid in the development and increase the knowledge of transforming the agricultural sector in a very sustainable and modern way. And we have not seen nor heard of these so-called programs, and I would like to know at what level does it reach the individual, because I think it would be more effective if it was done on a community or constituency base in terms of these workshops and courses. And furthermore, upon assessing these workshops and courses, I realized that it needs to be more practical and hands-on to give people that experience in hydroponics, aquaponics, and also, the smart farming. And I think that these upcoming businesses like Berry Cove and even Sprout Farms, who are building greenhouses, are great opportunities for internships or on-the-job training that we can be utilized. And oftentimes we have these training programs and these courses, but we end up not having a direction to lead the youth to get jobs. And I will touch on that in social development when we come to that. So, it's clear that proper policy has not been developed or perhaps implemented to drive these dreams, I'm calling it dreams, forward and actually influence our agricultural sector. There is a lack of efficient and effective policy, yes, but before it becomes a policy, we need to ensure that there is an organized and effectively planned framework for this policy. And upon implementation, there needs to be a process that guides farmers, existing farmers, and potential investors as to how to meet and align with the government's vision for the sector. And this can really be linked to the inefficiency of the bureaucracy and the red tape involved in that hinders the birth and life of these policies. So overall, I think it was a good budget with great vision in terms of this sector, but I truly hope that the necessary steps are taken to ensure its success and that there are greater measures for accountability and transparency on how the money is allocated and spent. So now we're going to dive into social development, which is a bit shorter. And now my analysis on social development will encompass what would have been mentioned in the budget and what has occurred as a result of the pandemic. And, as the crisis at hand really influences the sector in a different way from how it would have operated prior to COVID-19. So in light of COVID-19 pandemic, I believe that social development would have received a large sum of money compared to prior COVID-19. And we would have really seen the materialization of this in the amount of hampers distributed and the various relief grants and the food card availability and stuff like that. And I just want to remind everyone that, this is ongoing. And, I think that the efficiency really of the bureaucracy and its lagging really needs some work. In the previous budget, the minister made mention of new programs that targets single parents and the most vulnerable in our society, and the implementation of a data management system that can quickly identify these types of households. And I think it's a wonderful idea. However, I have yet to see this materialize and be implemented, and we come back again to the lack of proper policy and policy planning. Now, the minister also stated that they vigorously, and this is one of my favorite points, where they vigorously tackled they're vigorously tackling the challenges of youth in urban and semi-urban areas that have high crime rates. Now, by doing what? Because I would like to know where are the examples that prove this statement. So I'm going to wrap up in a while, but I just want to say that honestly, I think that we need more long-term programs for the youth. We need to collect more data from them to let the policymakers know, or the programs be restructured so that we know exactly what the youths need and not what we want to give them. We also need to ensure that we actually have a direction to lead them, and we have jobs to give them. And I honestly find that we have other social development dreams that haven't materialized, and again, it's because of lack of proper policy planning. So because I am running very short on time, I will have to wrap up. However, do stay tuned to us touching back on social development in our Instagram Live on the budget forum that includes the sectors that would have been, missed in this post-budget forum today. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. So thanks so much, Jennifer, for that contribution there. Of course, highlighting some very key points with climate change on the cusp of everybody's, on the cusp of course, changing the entire global sphere. If not already changing the entire global sphere, and therefore the way in which we approach agriculture and the way in which we approach it overall is now a way in which we have to be looking at sustainable practices for farming and sustainable practices overall for everything that we're doing. So I see that as being very imperative. And I'm happy that you've touched and you've dwelled into that, and of course looking at the new way in which we should be approaching farming, the smart farming initiatives which you mentioned inside there. Fantastic. So I'm really looking at, of course, the ways in which we can see the intersection between agriculture and social development overall, and of course understanding the importance of youth within agriculture as a forward for the changes that we wish to see within our society, and the development which we wish to see, and the economic growth which we hope to experience as well. So moving on to our next speaker, who is ready and of course waiting to talk on the education sector. I'm happy that we have her here with us this evening as well. I know that she's been on several panels for the week already, so I'm very happy to have Ms. Rakaya Scott joining us here to, of course, speak to us on the education sector. And Rakaya Scott is a current undergraduate student at the University of the West Indies, pursuing her BSc in economics with a minor in environmental economics. Passionate about leadership, economics, politics, and diplomacy, Rakaya has been working with many civic society and governmental organizations and youth-led entities that enable her to exercise her passion. She's, of course, the former president of the Economics Society of UWI. She's also a former intern at the Health Economics Unit, Center for Health Economics, UWI St. Augustine. She's a former vice chair of the Caribbean Women in Leadership Trinidad and Tobago National Chapter. She's a two-time youth parliamentarian, serving as the Minister of Finance and Minister of Social Development and Family Services. And she also sat, of course, on 3 guild committees as Deputy Interclub Committee Chairperson, Deputy National Affairs Committee Chairperson, and Department of Economics representative on the FSS Guild Committee. She's also the head trainer of the Model United Nations, club and service director and membership chair of the Rotary Club of Central Port of Spain. And she's also a former Trinidad and Tobago youth ambassador to the United States. She has many passions besides for her love for economics and social development, and she has a newfound passion for media and journalism. And as a result, she has spent the last year as a media professional at WSN Content Capital. And of course, you have to catch her show as well, One and One. And she's of course the youngest solo talk show host on the network, and probably the youngest solo talk show host on any major network across Trinidad and Tobago as well. She's a dynamic young woman with experiences not only locally but regionally and internationally. So we're very lucky to have her here with us this evening, and of course to share her insights and her expertise on, of course, the education sector. So Rukai, I'm gonna just hand over to you now.
Hello, good night, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. Being at the ESU is like being at home for me. You know, this is where it all started. This is where the journey started. So I'm indeed pleasured to be here that the Econ Society has invited me to present today on education. Now, we're talking about the 2021-2022 fiscal year and the budget presentation that went by on Monday. And if I had to speak about education, I would have very little to say because very little was said on Monday. What we were told is that, you know, we have an allocation of $6.886 billion that was allocated to the education sector, which is actually it's less than what was allocated last year. Last year was $7.973 billion. So we've actually seen a reduction. And of course, we know over the past year, there have been, you know, some announcements in terms of gates and so forth that would have been reduced for postgrad studies, well, taken off completely. So I guess it makes us kind of, you know, reconcile that difference, but it is okay in the sense that we understand that we have to be equitable in terms of financial distribution across sectors in the economy, of course, identifying our priority areas. But that is where the problem lies. What are our priority areas? Now, it is my firm belief that education should be the priority of any nation. And I've, you know, done education, the economics of education. So I believe to have a very firm understanding of how this all plays into the human capital development of our nation and how that in itself is going to enhance Trinidad and Tobago. So let's just paint the scene, right? So during COVID-19, 26 million jobs were lost in Latin America and the Caribbean. 26 million jobs were lost. Now, that is because, of course, we know the impacts of COVID-19. So we have that concern about employment. And what COVID-19 has taught us is that employment has totally changed. The job market has changed. And right now we're in the fourth industrial revolution, which includes artificial intelligence, robotics, the Internet of Things, genetic engineering, quantum computing, and so much more. And we have to ensure that the population today is equipped with those skills to, you know, manage this changing labor markets, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but around the world. Now, this ties into the digital economy. Now, what the digital economy is going to request from us, we have our basic digital skills, our intermediate digital skills, and then our advanced digital skills. Before Trinidad and Tobago can talk about an advancement, we need to talk about the lack thereof, basic skills, the basic skills competency of our nation. So we're looking at the use of smart devices, navigating the internet, creating accounts and profiles, using apps, managing and locating information, creating a private digital identity. These are some of the basic skills. Now, whilst us young people, we're well versed in that, we don't make up the majority of our nation. And it's very important that when we speak about education, we have to understand that now we're in a time where we have to have holistic education in a meaningful way where the young, the middle-aged, and the elderly can benefit from this. Because if we're talking about digital transformation, we're talking about a digital world, a digital economy that requires all of us to be on the same page. And for that, we're going to have to use formal and informal education. So this brings me to, let's talk about formal education. Now, in our formal education system, the way it is operating right now, should not be the way that it is. And I know none of this was really mentioned in the budget presentation, but seeing that, we know we have $6.886 billion to work with, this is basically what I think we should do with some of that money, is really put investment into these areas. So our education system needs to cater to the multiple intelligences of our stakeholders, our students. So we're talking about the genius of the artist, the athlete, the tradesman, the cinematographer, the graphics artist, the musician, the agronomist, software engineers, scientists. We're talking about people who learn differently. We're talking about those who do not want to go down the traditional path of being a doctor or being a lawyer. So we're talking about people who have multiple interests. How do we tailor our education system to ensure that we strike a balance between what is required, the math and English, which is important skills to have, research and all of those things are important skills, but how do we marry that with the talent that we have in our young people? And then we also need to identify that the way our education system works currently is based on inequity. So you have not only schools, government schools that are largely under-resourced, you also have a lot of students who may come from families who are experiencing socioeconomic constraints. So we're talking about poverty, the loss of jobs and so forth. But then we also have to talk about those young people who are at risk. And when I say at risk, I'm referring to young people who may come from criminal families, or young people who may be exposed to drug addiction, alcohol addiction, domestic abuse. So we really need to make sure that our education system is not telling that child, when that child comes into class, we're not all of a sudden treating that child, discriminating against that child and making them feel that they are not smart enough to be in the classroom, because that is where the problem starts. So we have to ensure that our teachers are equipped with this sort of social skills and social training to understand these nuances that exist within young people with at-risk youth in several communities in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, I've been talking about AI, robotics, genetic engineering, and so forth, and all of these nice, lovely terms that I've been using about our upcoming job market. Now, yes, our education system needs to cater towards that, but the big question is, who is going to teach children and teenagers and young adults in the universities and the other schools about these things? So now it actually tailors Trinidad and Tobago into a different direction, where it's not just about educating students, but it's about educating teachers and developing a training program to equip people who can come and disseminate this information to the learning population as well. So so let's talk about a holistic education curriculum that equip our schools with all the resources that they need. And I mean, I can get into an entire conversation about how our government schools operate, but I know that's not what I'm here to do. So I'll save you all the hassle. If you all want to check that out, you all can visit my Instagram profile. I talk about that quite a lot. So let's look at that as well. Teacher development programs is an excellent way for us to, to give teachers that knowledge so that they will be able to modify their classes, look at new ways to implement, audio learning, visual learning, and so forth in their classes. And I mean, right now we can see teachers taking it upon themselves to do that, but all teachers are not the same. And while some may take it upon them because the sheer love and joy that they experience in bringing knowledge to other people, we have to make sure that we kind of empower teachers as well to do that. And then we need to marry the online learning with the physical space and really create a thriving learner-centric education system. So not only are we addressing the youth at risk, we're also addressing our education curriculum so that it tailors towards the demands of the new world. So that is, essentially what it is I wanted to say. So of course, my presentation had nothing to do, I guess, with the Minister of Finance, because he really didn't say much, and that in itself is a message. He didn't say much, and we have the supporting documents that is going to come out soon, so we can look forward to that and really see what that brings to the forefront, so we can see, all right, he mentioned this, all right, let's see where it goes. But if I just had to, just give a general outlook on the budgets, I know I'm going off topic here, but I definitely think a lot of these things that were suggested are not new. We have been regurgitating policies and ideas, and Trinidad and Tobago has no shortage of ideas. We have wonderful ideas because we have truly talented people in this country. But what we suffer from is the lack of social infrastructure to support those plans and the lack of proper implementation to support those plans, to see those plans come into fruition. So whilst yes, we can judge policies based on their intention, I think we need to start judging them based on their results. So we're talking about education. We have $6.86 billion. We know GATE is no longer available for postgrad, and that poses several implications. We know that the government is making serious cuts, but let's hope that within this allocation, we can start talking about and implementing policies and measures to equip our young people with the skills that they need for the new and upcoming job market, and with the through the informal education system, which is just as important as the formal education system, to ensure that nobody gets left behind, and we can have our elderly and other members of our society be part of this education process if we're going to move to a digital economy. We need action. We have real plans. We could rel plan. Trinidad and Tobago is a nation, we could rel plan, but we need action. That's what we need. We need to see these things materialize. We need to see them in front of our eyes. I need to know, listen, you know how much times I show my father how to change a profile picture on Facebook? I fed up. He needs to learn to do it himself. And he's not in school anymore. You understand? So we have to start talking about informal education to ensure that every member of our society can be educated for the demands of the new world. So thank you so much. And of course, I'm here towards the end to take any questions. Yes, and I hope you all enjoyed everything that I said, and I tried to use, many examples and put my father business out there too, so that you all can understand that these are real life issues that we experience, and it's not no academic coming to speak to you all about something. So we really need to, get all of these perspectives out there. So thank you so much for the platform. Thank you to the ESU. And of course, I'm here to take any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that contribution there, Require very succinct, but nevertheless going in depth into some serious issues that we're all asking across the board there. When we look at education, upskilling is always a big thing that you want to be approaching. And of course, during this COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a major shift towards the digitization overall. And we were talking about that earlier with Essalon as well. And now my question is, are these teachers even trained to approach blended learning approaches and digitization within the classroom and everything like that? And where is the budget for this training of those teachers as well? Have we put thought into that? Of course, as you said, we have to wait for the document to come out, right? The full thing, so we could take it in properly and read through properly, and have a firm understanding of where we're going with the education system in Trinidad and Tobago, and what will be our new approach, especially as well with this new, some people vaccinated, some people unvaccinated. So vaccinated reaching the school compound, unvaccinated out of the school. How do we approach the education system now with that? What are the measures being put in place? What are the policies being put in place to mitigate any issues that may arise out of that as well? So upskilling of the teachers and of course of the staff as well, and you need to even look at introducing new types of staff into your school system, into your systems as well. You're looking at a technologically advanced staff as well that needs to be introduced. So I like that idea. Hopefully we'll see something along those lines when we read through the full document that will be released very soon. But nevertheless, we're going to move into the next presenter. Of course, he goes by the name Chris S. Cosine, and we're happy to have him here with us. Chris is going to be talking on the energy sector, and I'm sure that he has the energy to talk on this sector. So Chris is currently pursuing his Bachelor of Applied Science in Process Engineering at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. He has participated in several national, youth, and regional parliamentary debates from 2018 to 2021, and he held the portfolio of Minister of Trade and Industry in this 2021 youth parliamentary debate. In 2018, he held the portfolio of Minister of National Security, and in 2019, he was the opposition member to which he represented Trinidad and Tobago in the regional youth parliament. Over his years, he has developed an appetite for youth development through RBC Young Leaders and policy making through the many parliamentary debates. He also held several portfolios on the UTT Student Guild, from treasurer to executive PRO. So from a visiting campus, Chris is here, of course, from UTT. And Chris, we're very happy that you've decided to join the ESU at this panel here. I'm happy to have introduced you, and I'm looking forward to your presentation on energy, which I'm going to be paying particular attention to as well this evening. So Chris, over to you.
Thank you very much, moderator, members of the panel, executive members of UWE-ESU, and viewing and listening audience. A pleasant good evening. It is indeed an honor and privilege to speak here virtually at this very appropriate, well put together forum. So I want to commend the Economic Society at UWE for putting this together. I commend and I congratulate all who have spoken before. I think we have really displayed to the entire country a youth perspective and what young people, university students have to say about the budgets. And I noted, while I have a scripted speech, I'm ad-libbing a bit, but what I noted was we are willing to criticize and scrutinize objectively. So I really want to commend us as young persons for that. And it's always refreshing to hear all of you all speak. So I listened for 3 hours plus to the minister, the Honourable Minister of Finance, and I was pleased to hear a few things, and I was not so pleased to hear some. This sitting administration would have regained the faith and the confidence of the electorate. So while looking at the budget, it wasn't a new administration assuming duties. It was just the continuing government, continuing whatever plans they had before. So, and I think that is something that we need to look at. So it's almost like we say business as usual. So the People's National Movement presented to the electorate a manifesto in 2020, and they would have won the election on August the 10th. And I was pleased to see the Minister of Finance connect the manifesto to the budget, because usually we don't always see that. In the past budgets, I did not see the connection, but in this budget, I did see the connection. So it was quite refreshing to see that. However, as I have said at various forums before, in politics, it is about policies, and we must engage in a meaningful discussion about this. Scrutiny and criticism is very productive as we are attempting to make the best policies for Trinidad and Tobago. Everyone plays a part: the government, the opposition, the independent bench in the Senate, and us, the young people of Trinidad and Tobago. But one of the things that I'm very big on, and maybe it might be because I'm a science student, as the moderator would have indicated, I'm studying engineering, that we must have data. And maybe that is the science part of me, but we must have data-driven policies. And my friend who spoke firstly, and I think he did an excellent job, he would have indicated, and I too would like to join him in congratulating and commending the government on their National Statistical Institute, which is very commendable. And I want to say that in order to know how we are going to treat with the problems, we must know what the problem is. So that Statistical Institute would assist with our data-driven policies, because we can't keep calling figures and doing things in a wish-washy way and hope that it will hit the target, right? However, it would be remiss of me not to mention a few things, because as I said, we have to be objective about this budget, right? So the minister would have indicated on page 52 of his presentation that they are looking to bring legislative agenda to treat with the National Statistical Institute in the near future. So as I said, I commend him on that. But on page 31 in the budget presentation of last year, he would have said that they are looking to bring some sort of transformation to development of statistics in the Ministry of Planning and Development of the Central Statistical Office into the National Statistical Institute. So that was a promise we heard last year. In 2016, he would have also said on page 45 of his budget presentation, Madam Speaker, we will bring to Parliament in the new fiscal year legislation to establish an independent statistical institution. So we're looking at, you told us it's in 2022, you told us in 2021, you told us in 2016, And yes, there was a fourth time as well. 2017, he would have said that we intend to lay in Parliament in FY 2017 the legislation to establish an independent statistical institute. So we have heard this on 4 occasions and we have not seen it yet. So it's like nobody living there when it comes to actually implementing this sort of statistical institute. So while I commend it on one hand, on the second hand, I question if it will actually happen. And I really hope that this time, on the fourth time, you know, they say the three times a charm. Well, maybe the fourth time might be the charm here. And maybe we might actually be able to see this implemented. And I listen to a lot of my peers and they all speak about implementation of policies, because you speak about these plans, but we don't see it happen. I think the president of the Economic Society, when she alluded to that. So it's a very deja vu conversation that we're having. And I mean, there were many other repeated promises and plans from specific economic zones to, and I don't want to get into construction, to broadband services, to agriculture. That fund with agriculture was a promise in 2021, 2018, 2019. So I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of all those things, because I'm sure that in the parliamentary debates, we would hear about those discussions. But I'm here to speak on energy. So I just wanted to comment on that as somebody who's big on data-driven policies. So the projected prices for oil, I would say it looks very reasonable. It looks very reasonable. But we must concentrate on decentralizing from fossil fuels to the renewable sector. There ought to be a medium to long-term plan to transition, which I would get into a bit later. And again, the Economic Society president, in her earlier contribution, she would have spoken to, there needs to be a medium, there needs to be a long-term plan. And it seems as though there's not one. We need to pay a close attention to 2 factors. Those 2 factors would be our national gas production as well as our oil production. Natural gas production in 2021 was recorded to be at 2.8 billion cubic tons. And that's just some units. So for some persons who may not be studying engineering or apt with the energy sector, those are just some units. However, in 2010, our natural gas production was 4.7 billion cubic tons. So as you can see that it has decreased, because it was in 2010 4.7 and now it's 2.8. This shows a significant decline in our natural gas production. Oil is being produced at a rate of 58,000 barrels per day in 2021, while if we go back to maybe even 2015, we would see that it was 75,000 to 77,000. So there's a very big decline in the way that we produce our natural gas and oil. And this was taken from the BP statistical review of 2021 and a few other reports that they would have put out earlier on from 2016 coming on. However, it is expected that production will be positive in 2022. BHP Ruby will increase oil production from 58,000 barrels per day to 70,000. Natural gas production is also expected to increase from 2.8 billion cubic tons to 3.3 billion. Now, as I said earlier on, the figure was 4.7 10 years ago. So what we're looking at is the position that we are in the energy sector right now is well over 10 years ago. Maybe I think it was the former minister, the former minister of energy, energy expert, I would call him, Kevin Ramnarayan would have said that these figures takes us back to 16 years ago. So we are actually in a very bad position, but I'll tell you where it gets good. So this is sort of the bad news, but there's some good news. So natural gas production is not sufficient to supply the demand needed in Trinidad and Tobago. The figure that we should be looking at is the 4.4 billion cubic tons. Although there is an increase in natural gas, it remains mostly negative. We need to look at 2 major hopes. That is our, deep water gas and cross-border gas. Both of these are at low probability in happening since the merger with BHP is uncertain in respect to the deep water gas. The probability of cross-border gas deal with Venezuela is lower now because of US sanctions and Shell losing interest. And I will get to these, and you'll hear as I go along, some companies losing interest. And I just want to just break down, because I know that sometimes the energy jargons are sort of hard for people to understand, but there's the upstream, the downstream, and NGCs in the middle. So that's where we are in the middle. And there's a lot of exploration and drilling, etc., with the upstream, while the downstream would be your consumers, buyers, etc. Now, natural gas and oil production will most likely remain constant for 2022 to 2023. The price environmentally would be expected to be at a good rate. However, not much revenue is expected due to the low production, as I would have said earlier on. Taking the following 4 things into consideration, we would expect economic growth in 2022, rise in gas production, rise in oil production, good prices in global markets, and the price of gas is also good. Now, the price of gas is good right now, and I know that I think it was a year ago, I'm sure everyone would have heard, it was a big news in Trinidad and Tobago when we heard about the oil prices going below $1, right? I think it was also below 0, you know, but it's actually good because there are external factors. So around the world right now, for example, and I'll use one example, and that example will be in the Gulf of Mexico. In the Gulf of Mexico, there was a hurricane. So as a result, the ammonia prices would have increased because they would have had that external issue there. Also in Europe, Europe had some of their oil prices, and in Asia, where it would have increased. So that too, we would benefit from. Now, in 2020, the economy contracted by 8%. Several plants were forced to shut down, as we would have seen reported in the news, Newsday, Guardian, they all would have carried it, as well as the refinery not being operational for the last 3 years. And in the refinery not being operational for the last 3 years was one of the most disappointing things to me as an engineer, well, potential engineer. What I'll tell you is any process engineering student, any year 1 would tell you the longer you take to restart any out of commission plant, it is the more expensive it would be, and it is the harder to attract a contractor who's willing to engage in this sort of contract to restart that. And I'll get to the 4 and 5 new plants that are sitting and you know, it is being wasted in the refinery right now because of the out of service commission. Atlantic Trade One is unlikely to restart due to the lack of gas production. I believe it is about 246 million cubic feet to start the Train 1, and it must be at a minimum of 50% capacity, and we do not have that supply. And also, I believe the petrochemical company would have said that they could not commit to 5 years of that supply. So again, we're looking at that low supply of gas. So both BP and Shell has changed course and are heavily influenced by policies of the European Union. BP is shifting to renewable energy as well as Shell. Therefore, investing in Trinidad and Tobago is less likely. So I was quite happy to hear the minister, and I also believe the minister in the office of the minister in the Ministry of Finance, Brian Manning, he would have also indicated on one of the post-budget conversations that they are going to look at reviewing the energy regime. So I was quite happy to hear that, because that is a conversation and a ploy that the Energy Chamber in Trinidad and Tobago has been calling for many years, because we must make our energy practices and policies in Trinidad and Tobago attractive to fit the niche markets and what is new out there, which is the renewables. And that is where Shell and BP is willing to invest. They're saying, we're not really willing to invest in these fossil fuels anymore. We want to go to the new world, and the new world is looking at the renewable sector. So BP is not drilling in Trinidad and Tobago right now. In 2015, BP was drilling at 4 different sites. But since May of 2021, BP has ceased drilling operations in our country. That's a very bad thing. That means we are not as attractive as we once were. There's no expectation as to when they will resume drilling. So we don't know. And I mean, if this was since 2015 and now that they're not drilling, it doesn't look like they will be coming back. Yeah, I mean, we're hearing about Guyana finding so much hydrocarbons, and we're looking at competing with so many other countries in the world. This is mainly due to the unattractiveness of our fiscal regime and the view of their future in our country. It is expected that this positive growth in the energy sector will not last beyond 2023. The energy sector was at a peak in 2013 to 14, and it is quite difficult to get back to that sector. And I would have explored that earlier on. So we know that the big D word is diversification. So I'll get to that too, because I think as much as we criticize the budgeted presentation, I also have some of my own little plans, you know, I think as young people, as engineers, as, you know, economists, young persons, we should have some sorts of solutions. And as I stated earlier on, it was very disappointing to not hear the Minister of Finance speak about the opening of the refinery. I can tell you that the refinery has about 4 to 5 new plants and should be up and running. The faster we have these plants out of commission, is the more expensive, and it will take very long, and it will take a lot of attractive attributes to make us very attractive to the industry. So I wanted to also speak on bunkering. We have to look at good locations for bunkering. That too, there's a low sulfur plant in the refinery that I think should be used. It should be used, and it should open so that we can explore that bunkering aspect. But it is imperative that we look beyond the energy sector for growth in our economy. And as I said, diversification is the way forward. The renewable sector, we can use heat, wind, geothermal, hydropower. Barbados has said that they have 30,000 homes that use solar power heating. Jamaica is using wind energy, and this would reduce our power generation costs and dependency on the fuels. I think also it will decrease our greenhouse gas emissions, reduce air pollution, and it would subsequently treat with climate change. So I wanted to speak on a few other things, but I know I'm pressed for time. I think we need to look at attracting foreign direct investment. We need to take TNT's energy sector global. We need to increase the local content in the energy sector, create a more competitive environment for the supply of natural gas, increase domestic use of renewables and renewables technology. And I want us to include in the educational sector new innovative engineering methods to treat with the new world and the manufacturing sector. So I leave you all here with this, and I thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Well, I came in just at the right time, because I was just about to tell you that we could save it into the question and answer section. I know that you're a passionate guy. If you'll give Chris a chance here, Chris break down the whole energy sector for us, you know, and very comprehensively as well. So Chris, thank you so much for your contribution there thus far. Hopefully we can get back to some of those points, because I know I was listening. You have something around foreign direct investment and stuff there as well that I would have loved to hear expounded a bit more, but of course we pressed for time. Of course, your major points being around movement towards the future and renewables as being the future. So that's where our eyes should be. That's what should be on our horizon as well. So thank you so much, Chris. And we'll be back to you in the question and answer section as well. But nevertheless, I'm going to move into our last speaker for this evening. And I'm happy that he has also decided to join us here as well. His name is Thane Guerra, and Thane is a 20-year-old third-year MBBS student who's passionate about photography, planetary health, and disaster and emergency response. He's the current vice chairperson of the Medical Sciences Student Council. He's steadfast in his desire to help youth and shape the future generations, which encourages him to follow a career in pediatric surgery. Thane is also the National Officer of the Standing Committee of Medical Education in Trinidad and Tobago Medical Students Association. In this position, he aims to encourage student development outside of the medical curriculum, and it is his goal to make current and future medical students well-rounded and equipped to serve the global community. So I'm happy that Thane is here with us today. It's always a pleasure to introduce a fellow Saint as well. So I'm happy that I get that opportunity as well. But Thane, you know, health is a big aspect here, a big conversation. So of course, I'm going to be all ears, and I'm sure everybody's going to be all ears, especially since pandemic is probably the most repeated word in that, and COVID-19 in the budget presentation that was done just a few days ago. So Thane, over to you, and I'm looking forward to what you have to say.
Okay, so thank you for that wonderful introduction. And first, I'd like to say thank you to the ESU for allowing me to take this opportunity to give the perspective of the health sector on the budget. I can't say this in words, but I've been outspoken by my fellow colleagues here tonight in the analytical and the depth in which they can analyze the budget, and the clarity and conciseness with which they've done all this and given us so much information in such little time. So let's get to it. Let's go straight for the numbers. Health in this budget received the second highest allocation with a $6.395 billion allocation. This is an increase from the 6.05 budget allocation of 2021. This holds the same percentage of 12.2 of the total budget allocation. Which, as Daria mentioned, we are in a pandemic, and in this we should remember that this money has to serve the normal and the parallel healthcare system. And as the Minister of Health mentioned last week or the week before, it took $480 million in the country's COVID-19 response fund. That number is only increasing every day. And although it's great news that we've gotten this much in the allocation, it is very important that we focus on how the money is utilized. And that's the recurring topic we've been speaking of tonight, the utilization and the implementation of the propositions and promises that the Minister has made in the budget. So on one hand, we have the total of US $254 million acquired through loans, the Latin American and the China development banks. That will be earmarked for that was originally earmarked for vaccines, will be utilized for the purposes such as the acquisition of medical supplies, pharmaceuticals, PPE, and the other approved purposes. And that is good. We have some steadfast plans already in place. However, we need to look at what is going to be used after this expenditure, where there's room after recurrent expenses, after pandemic expenses for innovation and improvement in our healthcare sector. The recurrent expenditure from 2021 was estimated $4.769 billion, and we are yet to see the revised information from this. The budget only 2 days ago, and they are yet to provide the summary document, which will have to wait until the budget debate. So we're working with this information so far. The expenditure for last year increased by $1 billion from 4.06 to 5, from 5.06 to 6.05. And that gives as a testament to how much the pandemic has increased our dependency on the Ministry of Health. But with the additional stress that comes with the pandemic, it begs the question, what is left for investment? And investment and improvement is the entire topic that we had today. So let me start with the propositions that the Minister made for the fiscal year of 2022. And the main word I've been using the entire night is digitization. The Minister mentioned several times that about the nation's digitization trust. The Minister stated that in 2022, we will introduce a pilot project, the National Digital ID, which will improve management and the issuance of social services grants and access in the preventive health services. And I was happy to hear that. But what I have the question is, will this national ID system be integrated? Will it be integrated with the appropriate health information system at our facilities? So in last year's budget summary, we heard that they're implementing and investing in new health information services at the Riemann Point Fortin Hospital, which was newly constructed and commissioned in the last fiscal year. So it begs the question, will this new national ID system be implemented into these health information systems and into these systems utilized by all of our health facilities in the future? But there's a keen problem with that, the integration of this national ID system. We can only achieve maximum effect in our health services once all medical files are digitalized. Ask anybody who's gone anywhere for any kind of past medical record, it is a terrible situation to be in because all our files are on paper, stuffed in a room, and very difficult to access. And then upon digitalizing these files, we should have access to them. There's one thing to have the system digitalized, but the next thing to have access to them at the point of care. We advise that our teams be equipped with mobile devices that are in sync with this new system that will allow us to access and edit all our patients' digital files within the healthcare facility. But as the public healthcare sector is picking up, a patient does not only seek medical care at the public healthcare sector, but they seek their private institutions. We hope that this national ID system will allow us to integrate both the information from the public and the private sector to get the true total information from our patient. Because as anyone who's ever watched a medical drama, the history is the primary tool for diagnosing and treating a patient. So without the full image, without the full history of our patients, how can we truly treat them? How can we know the implications of surgeries they've had that was not in our public sector? So this is one of the propositions we've had. So now the other propositions that we've had, yes. So Minister also mentioned investment in medical tourism. Many of us don't know what medical tourism is. I'll get into that as I continue further. Okay, so by promoting medical tourism and making Trinidad a medical hub for treatment in the Caribbean, we aim to create the health sector from a non-revenue earning to a new source of revenue. And what is medical tourism? Medical tourism is basically where persons from outside of the country, within the region, the international scope, come to our country seeking the highest standard of medical care. And the reasons why they would come here is because we were aiming to achieve the same standard of treatment as the United States, United Kingdom, and the rest of the world for a cheaper cost. So we still gain a profit, but at a more attractive package for persons. And you might be wondering, what implications does medical tourism have for us? Let me go into a field where medical tourism has shown fruitful in the world. So for example, Thailand's medical tourism industry has become the largest in the world, generating revenue of approximately $340 million in 2010. It has increased to $622 million in 2020. This represents an average annual growth rate of 20%. And in addition to the medical tourism revenue, it accounted for 0.16 of Thailand's GDP in 2030. So as you can see already, medical tourism presents a great opportunity to stimulate an influx of revenue. Not only does it bring revenue, but it comes with employment opportunities. As many of you know, every year we have hundreds of young adults graduating in medical degrees, be it pharmacy, nursing, MBBS. But yet every year we see that there's very little, smaller, fewer and fewer amount of positions for them. So the implementation of medical tourism and the investment in medical tourism gives the opportunity to employ these trained and highly skilled professionals. Studies show that the investment in medical tourism helps to retain skilled healthcare workers in the host countries because of increased wage rates. And that's good because every year we also see, due to the lack of employment, we see a drastic ranging to the other countries, the other islands, to the US, to the UK, because that is where medical professionals are being used to the fullest. However, there's a caveat to medical tourism. As with all things, there's a caveat. The most often discussed adverse impacts in literature is the pressure medical tourism exerts on the public healthcare system of the host country in relation to resource diversion and the internal ranging. So we always think about the movement, the shift of our best minds to the foreign countries. But what about when they move to the fancier facilities that only provide private healthcare to external and foreign nationals? This problem can arise when the migration of healthcare workers move to these facilities and therefore producing a shortage in the public healthcare sector. And what about the little man, our citizens who solely rely on the public healthcare service? They will be reduced to a decreased level of quality in our healthcare facilities, and this will have subsequent impact on our reduced labor productivity because of the poorer health. And this therefore brings into question where the benefits of medical tourism are very favorable effects. And so you may think this is just a bold statement that the ministers put up, but the government has already made strides in their endeavors towards the promotion of medical tourism. The Cuba hospital that's currently using to treat our Cuba patients was built with the intention of enhancing the quality of medical treatment in Trinidad and Tobago. It was to be equipped with the finest and the best medical technology to treat both our nationals and those from away who would wish to come in. However, there's a big hindrance to fulfilling this. This is what we call the pandemic, COVID-19. The attraction of medical tourists is heavily dependent on our COVID-19 situation. This plan cannot come into fruition unless we control the COVID-19 pandemic. As no patient wants to visit a COVID blacklisted country for medical procedures. And simple as that. This brings me to my next point. The budget 22 has been entitled The Resilience in the Face of a Global Pandemic. However, I think there's more we can do to enhance our resilience. We need to prioritize public health, and therefore we need to put health before the wealth. We should prioritize public health and public health measures. Yes, a national quarantine system is hard and expensive to maintain, but it's because of our laissez-faire attitude towards it that we now see the Delta variant in community spread in Trinidad and Tobago. So we see where they are reallocating funds to PPE and pharmaceuticals and to our staff. But if we keep allowing ourselves to be susceptible to every infection wave, the funding will never be enough. And I spoke about our staff. The minister, I was really happy to hear this. The minister spoke about the regularization of our nursing staff, their contracts, and the implications of maybe a pension. This shows a fruitful and promising intent to invest in our most pertinent health resource, our staff. Because we could have 99 health facilities with the best equipment, with all the staff to utilize them and truly give treatment to our patients. It will be all for naught. But further, I would beg to ask that the minister seek into giving our nurses permanent employment. They have shown more and more every year their resilience and their training is beneficial to our economy, as has provided us the ability to restrain the COVID-19 pandemic from having full force on us. And lastly, I would like to wrap up because I've been ranting about the propositions that the minister has made, but how does health really impact the economy? So I'll go strictly from the family perspective. The ideal family has two patients who are working and healthy. They go to work, they're able to provide food, shelter, and education for their children. When a parent gets sick or when a child gets sick, neither of them can be productive to society. The adult can't go to work and provide productivity to our labor force, and therefore reduces our general revenue. And then a child who cannot attend school regularly misses out on his education, and this impedes their ability to become a productive member of society, and therefore decreasing our ability to benefit our economy. And I could go on and how to the many ways in which health can impact the economy, but I think it's pretty well said and pretty understood over the last 18 months of which we've been tackling this pandemic. And there's no doubt the pandemic has applied a pressure to our entire economy, but the healthcare sector allowed us to withstand substantial force. And I've mentioned this before. It's the reason why we're still able to stand on our education, on our energy sector, on our farming. Out the health sector, we'd have been fully susceptible to disease. That's taken away from us the best minds and most compassionate hearts in the medical field, and has exacerbated many cracks in our healthcare system and many of our health systems. But now is the time for us to pick up the pieces and rebuild like never before. Yes. So with this, I wrap up my presentation, and thank you all again for giving me the opportunity to give health perspective.
Thanks so much, Thane, for your contributions there as well. Of course, examining the fact that that the allocation was the second largest towards the health sector, and we understand why as well with the current pandemic and the current situation that's occurring across Trinidad and Tobago. So I want to invite all the panelists back up. Thank you so much, Thane, once again, and I look forward to the day when you become a doctor and combine, of course, your analytical skills here in the economic field to really improve the healthcare system from that perspective as well. I want to invite all our panelists to really turn back on their cameras here as we go into the question and answer segment. And actually, I think it's quite fitting for me personally now, coming off the last presenter and what information was said, for me to pose a question, almost combining both the health ideology and the healthcare system, and of course education as well. So I want to pose this question to Rakaya Scott and bring this as the first question forward. Really, should there have been a stronger allocation within the education sector itself towards some sort of health education, especially given the new wave of this Delta variant entering the pandemic, and how we've seen our population responding to the pandemic as well, right? To me, there should have been some kind of fixation, of course, in that area, that specific area as well. So let me pose that first question to you before I move into the questions to the other panelists.
Yes, so that is an excellent question. Now, I will explain, first of all, what has happened in this budget. So in this budget, education has been given 6.886 billion and health right afterwards 6.395 billion. Now, there's been a removal of VAT on certain food items: pigtail, curry, biscuits, cornflakes, canned meat, and canned fish. Those were the ones that were mentioned. The extended list is still to come out. But right off the bat, when we look at this list, it's not very healthy. So that's not a healthy combination of things that you should consume, right? It's high in salt and high in sugar, and those things have lots of complications, especially, and seeing that I have done, a little bit of work in the health economics realm, I know for a fact that the Caribbean suffers with an issue of comorbidities, where we have lots of hypertension, heart disease, and diabetes is very, very prominent in the Caribbean. So the Minister of Finance said this, and I quote, "One of the second pillar represents repositioning and reprofiling medical education as part of our healthcare delivery diversification strategy for the economic transformation of the country." Now, I struggle to understand what that really means, but I'm assuming he's talking about medical education in a sense that we want to ramp up medical education. We want a healthier population. We want people to be more cognizant of what they eat and what they drink and how they exercise and how their lifestyle, if you smoke, if you drink alcohol, and those sorts of things, and in general, how to take care of your health, But then I don't see that backed up by fiscal measures, because you're reducing VAT, you're removing VAT from extremely unhealthy foods. So for me, it shows a lack of aligned planning, a lack of strategic planning, because we don't necessarily know what the objective is. So to answer your question, yes, I think we do need a section of this budget to go towards, more education in that realm, because let's face the facts, a lot of us think that we eat healthy, and when we look at it, we really don't. You might think that because you're eating vegetables, but you're putting a bunch of butter and a whole set of pack seasoning in the vegetables, that's not cutting it either. So we really need to ramp up education. And I also think that education may not necessarily, at some times, depending, need a financial incentive, because information is at our fingertips, y'all. We are in the digital world, the digital economy. I can just simply go on Google and research these things. And us as younger people, we have an advantage because we know how to navigate the digital space. But if you look at the numbers, it's not necessarily majority young people with the diabetes and the hypertension and the heart disease. So that's why we really need to focus on, our older population as well, and seeing how we can get this education directed to them. Having free pamphlets in the health center is not helping. That is not the way to go. That is, first of all, nobody would really want to touch it in the first place. When you go to a public health facility, nobody really wants to touch it, because let's be real, these are the times that we live in, and so that's not necessarily the best way to go about it. So yes, medical education is something that needs to be considered, and it cannot only be disseminated in a one-dimensional way where it's focused on young people alone. It needs to have a diverse approach, so that you can target young people, you can target, the Gen X and so forth, so that everyone is able to benefit from this source of education. So if you have diabetes, you know what to do now, you know what to amp up on, you know what to do less of, etc., etc.
And of course, just adding to that point there, Kaya, if this happens, there's some sort of sustainability happening as well, because the healthier your population is, the stronger they are as a labor and a workforce. So I know Thien was raising that as well inside there and highlighting those factors. And of course, a big part of moving towards a health and the understanding of a healthy population and strengthening of labor force as well is what we eat. And food security, of course, is a big concern as well across Trinidad and Tobago currently. So let me just dive into the conversation with Janelle now around agriculture. And my question almost immediately is, what areas in agriculture do you think is most lucrative for TNT to invest in, both as a means of export and ensuring food security? Because, you know, it's one thing to say, which you did highlight the fact that inside there, we need to produce more local, but do we have the capacity to produce more local in certain areas? Certain things just don't grow here, right? And we don't have the certain technological advancement as well to carry out certain processes in agri-processing as well. So my question almost immediately is, what areas do you think are most lucrative?
Okay, so you were saying that we don't have the technology, and now the government in their I would say plans, you know, they are really trying to endorse the agricultural sector to go more digital, or rather get into sustainable agriculture, such as smart farming, the hydroponics, the aquaponics. And, you know, we can really use the Berry Cove Island growers model for this question. The most lucrative, you know, crops to go into would be the berries and the peaches and these things that we import. And that's actually what this company is going to do. And the reason why it's lucrative is mainly because of the fact that these are things that we import, and it really hikes up our food importation bill. So by us producing it ourselves, not only do we sustain ourselves, but we can also export to the other Caribbean countries who don't have the money to implement the technology like we may have, and also we can supply them with that and earn foreign exchange. So I hope that answers the question briefly, because I'm scared to go in depth with it and end up talking for an hour.
No, well, I actually want to pick your brain a little bit more since you're here with us, because you're saying to grow berries and peaches, but you need certain conditions for that to occur. Even though, yes, you can grow within the tropics, right? You still need certain conditions. Wouldn't it be more lucrative to look at our crops that we already have that grow in abundance here, right? That are not available at other markets externally, say in foreign countries, etc., and look at an exportation model that will really move our products that are grown in mass here to those external markets in like Europe, where some of these tropical fruits are not available.
Of course we can, but my my main thing is the food importation bill that we have, and the fact that it takes a very large portion of our foreign exchange, which, like I had mentioned, you know, we have a shortage of. And when you say we don't have the conditions, of course we don't have the conditions because we're in the tropics. However, like I had mentioned, Berry Cove and island growers, they are setting a very good example for us to implement more models and businesses like that in order to actually produce these crops that we so crave and demand. So, and of course, like us, other countries don't have that.
Who so craves and demands? Because to me,
the tourism sector, the consumers, the individual consumers like you and I
don't crave berries and peaches, but I understand where you're coming from, I guess. But to me, that is a certain sector within society that has a demand for these products. Whereas, why not create? I'm sorry to go into this because I'm very much a big fan of what we have local, and as well, there's a cultural aspect to that as well, to the maintenance of our locally grown goods and exporting that as something unique. You know, there could be a certain type of marketing that could go with that as well out there. And for me, you know, I'm just seeing that as a model that would function faster than the other model. Not denying that the other model is good, but that might just function faster, just given the circumstances that we have. I don't know how you feel about that. I guess I'll give you the last say on this.
Of course, I endorse that. However, I do support the government's vision of wanting to think a bit more futuristically. And also, like I said, really take down that food importation bill. Like Sloan said, we're swimming in debt. I quoted the billions of dollars that we spend on these luxury goods, and I am happy that they are taking the steps necessary to try to create an agricultural sector that can cater for the production and supply of these goods. So yes, we can do things like cocoa and coffee and other crops that we have here, like cassava and the provisions and whatever, and we can send that over to our Caribbean brothers and sisters, but I'm sure they also have that, and they are probably
Well, my thought was more Europe. How if we move it into Europe, you have that, and that also helps with your deficit as well in foreign exchange there.
So you were thinking more internationally other than regionally.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay. Then in that case, yes, then yes, I fully endorse what you're saying. Yes.
Well, hopefully we could see a bit of both happening in the near future there as well. And you will just like this conversation here, you will have people with a lot of differing views on how to go forward and which sector should get enough. So hopefully we have some more research and development done in those areas.
It all comes down to what is the most feasible investment and what would really benefit us at most right now.
Great.
So
I'm glad that you actually mentioned investment there, because I actually wanted to just hop across to drop a question for Essalone here as well. Essalone, we have a question coming in, which speaks, of course, to investment as critical for achieving growth, and of course, Janelle was just speaking about the deficit as well in our forex and foreign exchange. So what measures can we implement to facilitate investment in our economy, both by domestic citizens and foreigners? That's my question to you.
Thank you for that question. That's a great question. Now, investment is a critical component in our GDP. And in the interest of time, I'll do this really, really quick and try to talk really fast, because I'm seeing that we're approaching the hour really fast. But what constitutes our GDP? Our GDP comprises of C plus I plus G plus X minus M. And obviously, if one of the components is affected, the entire thing shifts. We need to stimulate that culture of investment. And how do we get investors confident? How we do that? That's the real question. Let me jump on the bandwagon of entrepreneurship by educating people on how to invest and providing incentives to SMEs. Yes, we saw something allocated for SME, but that does not help culture. For example, if you want to make bread with flour, how do we start? The Honourable Minister in a conference earlier on this year, in a Ministry of Finance conference, he said that there are individuals not accessing the loans available to them because of intense accounting. Then that's what we need to look into. Communication. How many young people, how many entrepreneurs are cognizant of the fact that this financing is available to them? And that is where we need to get the conversation going, and that is where the conversation is not. For example, the central bank. Central bank has a role to play as well. I was very disappointed earlier on when I did not see the central bank dialoguing on a conversation with commercial bank after we came out of the lockdown to provide some sort of financing or working capital to corporate clients. I was disappointed to see that, because you want businesses to try, if you want to get investor confidence, if you want people to buy into that, you must create the atmosphere for them. And if the atmosphere is not there, then you cannot get that confidence, and it's simple as that.
So you don't feel as if some of the small business grants and loans that were granted, you don't think that was enough? Essalone, if I'm getting it right.
You see, it takes into account these loans. It takes into account a certain segment of SMEs. It doesn't really target our local, like I said, the breadfruit flour, the dasheen. I am seeing dasheen cereal on the market. As you said, but exporting to Europe. That would be an excellent initiative for Trinidad and Tobago. Another thing, our arts and culture. I know you're very passionate about the arts and culture. I would love to see Robbie Belly and do your Sawati in Europe as well, playing in Europe. Right? That is where the conversation needs to be. How do we get culture out?
Essalone, I always
for example,
conversations with you, man.
Like last week, the Guild of Students at the University of West Indies had Precious Fest last Saturday. Why we can't market Carnival in the same way? I enjoyed myself last week Saturday, and I'm certain everybody here did the same. And big up to the Guild Vice President for doing that. We can enjoy ourselves too. Right? That's how we need to move. Think logically and think outside the box.
Salon, I love it. So you're looking at external markets. You're looking at selling our culture in such a way that is easily bought into from foreign markets as well. Always fantastic. I'm happy that you want to see Swati as well. Inside there, that's always a good thing. So I'm really happy to hear that, and I think that would be a really great way for us to be moving as well, improving our systems within some of these businesses and the processing systems as well, as Janelle was alluding to as well. So we see an intersection coming in here, of course, looking at training, upskilling, etc. So I wanna probably just throw over to Chris. I think Chris had something that you wanted to share, or a point that you wanted to build on, Chris.
I just wanted to comment quickly on the initiatives and stuff. And I know I was looking at a few panels and a lot of economists, and they would have indicated that it's good. Initiatives are good for these SMEs, as you would have asked the question earlier on. But what we need to look at is, and for small businesses, are persons who are ready or willing to start a small business in a position to do it right now. I mean, we're in this hard economic season. So yes, there's that initiative, incentive, but are we in a position for persons to actually access that? So the government not only, and I mean, it's not their responsibility, but it is their responsibility to look at the unexpected consequences and external factors that may come at this time because of the pandemic and prior the pandemic. So I just wanted to make that point quickly and then say it a little.
Only Mike O'Bannon, only Mike O'Bannon. You can't make such a big point, right? And we just got off a conversation around economic development, and a big issue that we're seeing right now is, of course, unemployment and rising unemployment rates, right? And a lot of people have been saying that the answer to this is more youth involvement in certain sectors. So you're in the energy, we're looking at renewables. A lot of young people have actually begun training and they're studying now, and what they're studying, the education that they're pursuing is along the lines of renewables as well. How important do you see youth in the involvement of say re-energizing the energy sector? How important do you see the youth presence there?
I think I see young persons' presence here. It's a big asset to the sector. And I think what young people bring to any sector in Trinidad and Tobago would be, we bring hope, we bring innovation, we bring energy, and we also bring tolerance, and at least tolerance and respect for the environment. Climate change is real, and we keep speaking about it. The Minister of Planning would have also, she was a part of a magazine, and she spoke about it as well. But the thing is, we're talking about it, we keep speaking about it, and we're not actually seeing the effectiveness in addressing it properly. And with the renewable sector, that's what we do there. I mean, you not only decrease your dependency on fossil fuels, which, as we know, will run out. The Inter-American Bank said by 2030, Trinidad and Tobago fossil fuels will be out. So we have to look to the renewables and heat, wind, geothermal, and it is being used in the Caribbean. So, you know, the conversation of, well, it's happening in first world countries. No. Just look across in the Caribbean and it's happening and it's working and it assists the environment as well. And young persons care about that. So I think our compassion and awareness of the social responsibility that we have, we're very aware of that. And I think that's what we bring to any sector, and in particular, the energy sector.
And also by introducing young people into your sector, I'm going to assume here, Chris, and you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong, we also look at longevity planning as well, sustainable planning. Of course, your labor force is now going to be there for quite some time. So the skill sets will be there for quite some time as well.
And as I indicated earlier on, that's where the education, and you know, this is where your policies and ministries marry, you know, and that's why public administration is so important, and planning and development, because the education minister should be liaising with the Minister of Energy in how we can look at reviewing tertiary programs. Are we investing in the human capital in the right way in Trinidad and Tobago? Because I mean, we're looking at the new world. We speak a lot on digitization. Let us find these new digital innovative methods to treat with the new world and engineering, the manufacturing sector. I wanted to speak on this earlier on, and I was a little bit pressed for time and I got a little sidetracked. But one of the things that I wanted to indicate was we need to look at methods and practices to meet the niche markets. So, and we're seeking to compete with the rest of the world. Digitization is a new way forward. Is the government considering plans to assist with manufactured products by the use of innovative engineering digitization methods, which shall improve efficiency in engineering? Efficiencies are, again, we go back to process engineering year one. You know, you have to find efficiency for some sort of reactor plant or equipment within there. So, and then decrease the need for manual labor. And it also, we can look at training some of our personnel out there. So we're not getting rid of them, you know, we're just teaching them new and better ways.
Chris, you and us alone could clearly take a line because you all seem to be on the same wavelength with regards to the way forward in terms of economic development. I saw that Rakaya wanted to make a quick point. I just asked that I keep it succinct because we have a pressing question here that needs to be passed on to Thane.
All right, no problem. So yes, I'm going to keep this short, very short and sweet about the energy sector. So in this conversation about diversifying away from the energy sector, it's important to know two things: that we need to diversify within the energy sector. And that means, you know, and we did that successfully in the past from oil to natural gas. So now it's about moving from natural gas to other forms of energy. And this is a thinking I would like everybody to employ, because we cannot just wake up one morning and completely change. We are an oil and gas economy. Let's understand that, right? Now, what we need to do is slowly but aggressively address these new energy sources as alternative streams of revenue. And this is simple. Look at the oil and gas industry as your 8 to 4 job, the job that you don't necessarily love, you know, but it's bringing in the money. It's bringing in the money that it needs to pay your bills, your mortgage, your rent, your car, etc. It's your 8 to 4. And you look at the renewable sector as your sideline business, the thing that you're passionate about, your talent that you've ignored for so long, and you know it's the better way forward. It's the more sustainable thing. But you know that you need your 8 to 4 to kind of finance your side business. So what you're doing is that every day you work a little bit harder towards your side hustle. So one day your side hustle could be your main hustle, your side hustle could be your 8 to 4, and then your 5 to 10 p.m. So that's kind of how we need to look at it, small ways into the future, because we will get very overwhelmed if we think that we have to transition into this now and a complete transformation. So that's my last contribution for tonight. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Rakaya, for that point, and it actually augments well into the next question that we're going to present here, because you were talking about diversification in the energy sector, and my question is really about energy diversification rather in the medical sector and in the health sector thing, because right now what we've seen is a lot of focus, of course, around the pandemic and around COVID-19, right? But there are other areas that are now being affected and impacted by, of course, this current situation as occurring, the current pandemic, right? And some areas that might need urgent attention as well, because the threat, as we were mentioning earlier, of things like hypertension and diabetes is still very much real, still very much alive. And I know you were talking about medical tourism, but I don't even know if we're ready for medical tourism at all, because we still have systems here within our own public healthcare system that needs to be fixed and amended. So my question to you would really be, when we're talking about diversification of the health sector, away from just the COVID-19 conversation, what other areas do you think should really be enhanced, or there should really be a contribution towards the development of?
I think that's a wonderful question. And I really wanted to take part in this previous discussion about when Eslon mentioned that we are promoting the use of these foods that are not helpful. We are budget focused on building resilience. However, by promoting these foods, we are building only our encouragement for disease and poorer lifestyle. So one focus I think we need to shift more towards is we need to prioritize prevention. And yes, the minister spoke about creating these centers of excellence and treating like the renal disease that they mentioned at the Kubas. So the first one you're going to build is a national center for renal disease. However, if we nip it in the bud, if we treat, if we prevent chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes, renal failure, that have these multi-system effects on us, we can truly diversify the economy. So the reason why I would say this is because if we reduce the amount spent on treating ill health, we have more to invest in the advancement of medical technology and treatment of other unknown diseases in the healthcare sector. And you ask what other fields we can diversify economics in. And I think that's a very hard question because the medical field is a wide and vast, and every day we come and see new disorders or new advances in the information that we have on diseases. So something as simple as polycystic ovary syndrome that plagues many young women these days, we don't know that it's highly linked to insulin resistance. We need to encourage research in the medical field before we know how to diversify the economics into the healthcare sector. And that's a big point that I would like to mention. We need to invest in research first before we know where we invest the money.
Thank you so much. I would like to take now to, of course, all our panelists and all our viewing audience for joining us. We're just 2 minutes after the hour. I'm going to hand you all over to the president of the Economic Society of UWI for her to just give any closing remarks that she might have.
All right, good night once again, everyone. So on behalf of the Economic Society, I would just like to extend a huge appreciation to everyone that tuned in. Thank you for the support to the Youth Voice and perspective on matters of the state. And, this was actually our first major event for the semester, and albeit one of the most anticipated and exciting, and it truly lived up to its expectations, and, we had a very dynamic and powerful panel of speakers. I coming from different backgrounds, I was so impressed by the analytical and insightful contributions of our panelists. And, here at the Economic Society, we really believe that it's imperative for young budding economists and leaders to gain experience and have a platform which they too can analyze and give opinions and suggestions on, the budget or any economic and social occurrence. So considering as young persons within the society, the budget really has a major influence on our lives. And, it's in the present, and it also sets a tone for the future in which we'll inherit. So, the budget isn't just more than just, how much money was allocated to the ministries and how much we have and don't have, but rather it's a synopsis of our situation, yes, but as well as what needs to be done, what can be done, and what ought to be done, and as well as the consequences of these actions followed by how it shapes both our economic and social status, but most importantly, our futures. So we really thank you for your attendance, your comments, your questions. Stay tuned for our second post-budget discussion live on Instagram. We will let you guys know when it will be, where we cover the untouched sectors that, weren't discussed today. Thank you.
Great. So thank you, everyone, once again. And thank you for tuning in to the Economic Society at the UWI St. Augustine. And thanks to the ESU for hosting this event here as well. It has been my pleasure being with you all and moderating this discussion. Thanks to Thane and Chris and Essalon and Janae and Rakaya as well. And of course, to our background team, who of course is always supporting there as well, Shanice and Chantel, and of course, Dr. Roxanne as well. So thank you all, everyone, for joining us here, and you all have a good evening.